speed of this problem.
Yeah, you can start.
Can you see online?
Yeah. Fine.
Okay, so welcome everybody for today's lecture. Today we are going to talk about the multimodal data fusion and integration in the first part, and following that we will learn the new techniques such as meta learning for the infrastructure, and then we will also see some of these transfer learning methods or some of the other social implications with some of the case studies for both of the cases. So as we said that today we are going to talk about the multimodal data fusion and integration, which will be followed with the discussion of heterogeneous data sources and some of the multimodal data fusion methods, with following, as we said, some of the case studies. So now when we talk about the diverse data in SHM, if you can imagine or try to understand a city using just one camera on the street corner, you will just find, or maybe you will miss a lot of traffic jams or the market noise, the river level. So structured health monitoring is some way, similar. So they more present, or they are more perspective is that they turn the picture into more detail, and that's why we use a heterogeneous sensor network to kind of use the structured health monitoring. And what is the heterogeneous sensor network? This is basically the different types of sensors which is kind of working together one at a time. And you have to also kind of remember that here we are not talking about one or each sensor at a time. We are talking about different combination of sensor to kind of get different kind of output. So there are several advantages of mixing of this sensor or taking this kind of hybrid sensor. The first one is definitely the robustness. So if one sensor kind of drifts or fails, you can understand. So the other one can actually cover the gap. So basically it's like switching from a single torch to a string of lanterns, right? So one gust of the wind cannot leave us in the dark. So that's how generally it works. And then another one is definitely the reliability in downtime. So definitely sensor could have some bad days, and networks should not kind of suffer due to that, right? So with diversity of different kind of networks, when one class goes offline, like say one of the fiber line is down, so accelerometers or acoustic or different kind of sensors, they keep the story still flowing. That means that your decisions will not wait, or your data should not wait as well, right? You will still keep having your continuous monitoring. And then another important incident or another important case is that the counter initiative but powerful. When you have a large number of data or large number of very low precision measurement, that can beat a very small number of high resolution ones. So when we fuse many good enough views with some kind of random error cancel, you can see that underlying some kind of behavior, they kind of give you a very single clear pristine image. So basically we talk about another important factor is that the uncertainty. The more the number of sensors you have, the more the diversity of the measurement in the data you are going to have. That means you will be having more confidence in your interval tightening. You will have more maintenance which will be proactive, and that means that is also gonna increase your safety margin. So some way it also kind of takes care of the uncertainty in monitoring results. So this is the kind of a process, and then we have talked about three of the important parts, right? So you see that we have combined some kind of multiple sensors or modalities here. Here we have tried to talk about the accelerometer, the strain gauge, temperature sensor or cameras. So rather than we are kind of betting into one of this kind of single perfect sensor, we deploy many of this kind of modded sensor and try to get a lot of better coverage compared to just relying on one sensor. So all of these signals are then they come into the sensor fusion hardware, and they do have their several details into that, and that's been called as an DAQ or there are been called as a microcontroller as well. And then once you get all of this in the hardware, then that passes to the processing to filter the noise or any kind of and align it to the time step. So then once this pre-processing will be done, then you will get the data processing, right? That means the results which is some kind of unfilled data stream that flows into this data processing from the hardware, right? Where we extract the health indicators, and then that's gonna give you a very right or kind of more robust or more reliable data. And as I said that there are several advantages like robustness, reliability, reduced uncertainty. So there are various advantages into this. So now how do we make all of this data useful? So we rely on the sensor infused hardware systems, right? And this kind of platforms, they can collect the, or they can time synchronize as well, or they can aggregate the system from different kind of sensors. It could be accelerometer, it could be strain gauges, it could be any kind of different sensors, and often more mounted across the asset. So you can see that by aligning this kind of signals in time and space, actually, Fusion improves a lot of accuracy, lot of reliability and those things. So under the hood of a typical Fusion stack, you can include the microsatellar, as we said. So you can see that we have several type of this. So one of this is microsatellar. Then another one is DAQ. And so there are a lot of those kind of acquisition methods where like it can communicate interfaces to move the data and to process the units that can handle a lot of pre-processing and synchronization. For example, like filtering or resampling or any kind of clock alignment. So if you look into this particular hardware, they has to be like quite strong enough to kind of take care of those things. And then once that is completed, then definitely you can have some kind of clean synchronized data, and that can be flow into the decision making stage. Whether that can be model-based diagnosis, they can be machine learning interfaces, they can be threshold-based alarms. Those kind of things can actually work out, right? So now if you will try to, let's take one of this quiz. Which one is not standard advantages when we talk about the heterogeneous network in SHN? So is it like high robustness or the better reliability during the single sensor downtime, or always higher spatial resolution than any single sensor, or reduce the uncertainty? So just now we just saw that different kind of heterogeneous sensor. So among this, which one you think that is not one of the stated advantages of using this? Does it give high robustness? That's right. And can you get better reliability compared to one single sensor? You can, right? But is there any kind of rule that when you have this spatial resolution, right, of one single sensor, and when you have spatial resolution of this heterogeneous sensor, so maybe the single one can have better resolution compared to the together one? Are there any rule like that? It can possibly happen that with your single sensor you can have some kind of better resolution, isn't it? And it also reduces uncertainty. So if you look into this above points, which one is the correct one? C, right? Even if you take a bunch of sensors together, there is no tendency or there is no certainty that that's gonna give you the better resolution. It can possibly happen that you can also get it using the one sensor as well, right? That means C is the correct answer. So did you understand that even if you take this hybrid sensor, you can say heterogeneous sensor, sometimes it can possibly happen that the single sensor can also perform better, right? We are using the heterogeneous sensor to kind of get into more safer state compared to just using one single sensor, right? So now if you will try to quickly look into that we have seen why Fusion matters yesterday. So now let's try to look into this hardware, and that actually matters in the case of structural health monitoring, right? So we will see few of the cases, and we will see that how this kind of sensors are being coming together to make a heterogeneous sensor which can give us better results compared to just single, maybe using just accelerometer or just using any kind of other sensor, okay? So the first one is the digital signal processing. We also call it as an DSPs, right? So if you will look into that, there are a lot of workhorses for like raw sensor stream. So they clean up the noisy accelerometer or the strain data, and they filter it, right? And they extract the key features in real time. So when we talk about the real time monitoring, so the downtime model is not fighting the garbage. And that's what it actually works. If you look into this figure, they are this is the DSP, is the chip, and that is actually with the multiple sensor outputs, multiple sensor inputs, right? And that's how generally the digital signal processes work. Clear to everybody? And another type of one is the communication interfaces. This is also some way the same one where you can see that you have lot of different kind of input depending on different kind of sensor. So fusion only works if the data can move, right? In practice, if you think about the Ethernet or if you think about the USB or benches or test rigs or the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth, or if you can think about any other kind of devices, when we need some kind of lower power, the long range links in the field, right? And the choice here is between the bandwidth, the power as well as the range. So this kind of particular hardware is actually being called as a communication interfaces, and they are actually hub which is being showing the connection between the Ethernet, the USB, the Wi-Fi, the Bluetooth, those kind of things. Okay, and that's been called as a communication interface, and that's where this chip kind of work out, right? And then there are another different kind of hardware also, and that's been called as an hardware accelerator. So if you can think about the GPUs or if you can think about the TPUs, especially if you think about the FPGAs at the edge, right? When we need very fast matrix, especially if you think about some kind of machine learning interface or to run some multiple sensing or multiple sensing modalities in parallel, accelerators give us a very kind of good latency or very efficiency in which we cannot get in CPU alone. Right? If you use one of the CPU, you cannot do that. So basically, if you look into this hardware accelerator, you can see that they are very good. They are very specialized component that can speed up some kind of specific computations, such as matrix operation or some kind of machine learning, or when you have like multiple sensors which is working on a same parameter together. So this is actually very good, which one single CPU cannot work. Right? So basically, all of these cases you will see that we have like multiple inputs coming from different cases. It could be sensors, it could be different aspects, and basically we are getting the different kind of help so that we are not kind of getting into any uncertainty. We are not failed to collect the data or analyze the data even if one of these doesn't work. Right? And that's the main aim of this kind of fusion hardware. Okay. And then another important one is that smart sensor network. So basically when we see that there are many sensors now do the pre-fusion at the edge, right? So they can actually denoise, they can compress or even classify events quite locally, and then they can pass or summarize that to the upstream. That means that can reduce a lot of traffic, that can actually improve your reliability of the link which are intermediate. This one again you can see that the smart sensor network, which is another type of sensor fusion hardware. They kind of help in the edge processing, they kind of then go to the aggregation, and then further they go to the cloud. Okay. So basically this kind of sensors, or you can say this kind of hardware, they are possess capability that enable them to perform in the initial data of data fusion when we are into the sensor level. And again another type of this fusion hardware, or one of the last one I would say, is the custom hardware solution. So if you think about the unusual environment where you have some kind of high temperature or tight power budgets or strict certification, we need to co-design the stack, right? That means we can tailor the boards, or we can mix the signal from front ends, and we can firmware tune to the application. So if you look into this kind of custom hardware solution, they are actually the bespoke PCB with applications, right? Like automotive, they can use in drones. So you can see that I have given 3 of the applications: drones, medical, they can use in automotive. Basically, they are actually the solution that can be designed, that can be developed to address unique challenges and achieve optimal performance depending on the application. Especially when we think about some kind of high temperature, some kind of extreme temperature, when you have some tight power budget, depending on the application, it can actually be modified. And that's the reason it's been called as a custom hardware solution, because we can have different kind of applications. Depending on the application, we can actually modify this kind of hardware, right? So you can see that in SHM, the main question is that which box do we buy, and that's very important, right? It's how do we compose these pieces. So if you look into the first one, right? So here we have like different kind of accelerometers or multiple sensor inputs. Whereas here this is basically a communication hub where we do have like Ethernet and those things. And here we do have like GPU, FGPA, which one single CPU cannot actually do. Similar way, this is the cloud one when we have more data, so you kind of take this smart sensor network to process this and then further come to the cloud, right? and then this is a very custom made hardware where you can actually you can design this customized depending on the application. But again, as we say, that the main challenge is that which one should we choose, and that depends on some certain constraints as well, right? That also depends on power, that also depends on reliability, kind of bandwidth we are having, kind of sensor we could possibly use, the environment, data. So that's actually some way little bit important as well. And you will see that how do we compose these certain pieces. So it's not only choosing the correct software here, it's also that we look into the, I think the best application or the best example will be this one, that how do we select these parts, right, for our certain application, and then how we can kind of combine together to get some certain performance. So that's also one of the challenge when we talk about this kind of heterogeneous sensor. So now if you will try to look into the example, so you will see that I have tried to kind of show you some of the examples, especially look into that how this different kind of measurements can be used for different kind of sensor type. So this is basically gonna help you to understand the choice of specific sensor that is being used for SHM system, right? And that is being determined on the required measurement quantity. That means if you need to measure the displacement here, so in many kind of structures you will see that we track the multimeter scale movement, right? And that if you will look into this columns here, that's where we need to do that. We can use gyroscope, we can use ultrasonic. So depending on what measurement you need, to use the sensor accordingly. If you need displacement, we most of the cases use sensors like capacitive or magnetic optical or acoustic emission. Those are the things which we do use it. Similar way, if your measurement is velocity, right, for vibration or for rotating systems, then definitely it changes, and then we need systems like magnetic induction or optical methods, and that's very common. That's very good with bandwidth. They are very clean zero drift behavior. So similar way, if you need to measure the acceleration, that's like also one of the very important parameter of SHM. Then definitely we use piezoresistive, which has been used quite a lot. We do use MEMS, we do use piezoelectric for local damages. I think we all know that. Capacitive devices. So your choice here is kind of like trade-off, right? The bandwidth, the sensitivity, so many things actually been attached with this. Similar way, if you use the strain, right, that's one of the like classic piezoresistive gauges we do quite use a lot, right, for dense coverage. And then if you use the optical FPGs, if you remember that, when we need the EMI immunity, or we know we need it to for long run, because we know that PZT may not be always good for long run, right? Similar way, if we need to measure the forces, if we need to measure the temperature, pressure, depending on that, you need to kind of select the sensor type. Like if you think about pressure, commonly we use the piezoresistive in hydraulic or pneumatic subsystem that can couple with the structure, and that can give you a better result. So basically you can see that from this table, that how do we use this table, kind of start understanding what measurement we need. That means what measurement type we are interested about, and then we kind of pick the candidate of the sensor. And then we also, so you can see that for each of the cases there are varieties of options. So that also depends on the type of damage you are having or type of structures you are having. So there are certain parameters, but most of the cases if you have this measurement type, we generally select one of the sensor type, okay? And then if you will talk about the heterogeneous data here, or the heterogeneous data types, you can see that there are also certain reviews have been done that how the sensor being used in data fusion and on the strategy based on the output formats. And this is a very good tabular format to understand that how from the sensors it goes to the output format, and what are the data analysis method we generally use here, right? So if you will look into the first one is for the optical sensor. So optical sensor, we know that we do go to image, and that kind of go to mainly the DL based fusion, right? When the output is an image, that means like it can be RGB, it can be like or grayscale. So generally we use deep learning methods, we use CNNs, we can use vision transformers. That does the very heavy fitting for registration and the feature fusion. So similar way, you can see that there are another sensor type which we use as a radar. So what radar does is that it kind of take the pulse signal, right? And then it kind of go for the UAV swarm or the data fusion. Similar way, like we understand that what radar gives us, they gives us the pulse time of the flight or the phase data, whatever you can say. So basically in a distributed platform like UAV swarms, for fusion aligns with the multiple kind of streams to improve the coverage, to resolve these ambiguities. And then, as we said that there are several other ones also, which is the infrared and then satellite, ultrasonic sensor. There are NDT sensor, there are sonar, laser, X-ray, all of these there. So we will look into the third one. So for the infrared sensor, what we get? We generally get the kind of image, right? So basically, if you will look into the IR, so basically IR actually delivers you some kind of thermal image, right? So once you get this thermal image, then when we track the evolving temperature, right, or the hot spots in the image, we kind of try to use a method like Kalman filter or KL, which actually help us to integrate the sequential frames with the physics prior, right? Similar way, if you use the satellite, right? Satellite is also same. We get some kind of typical, very high resolution, some kind of panoply with some kind of images, right? So once you get these images again, then you use another kind of data analysis method, which is also being called as a panachromatic image. Similar way, you get NDT sensor. So you get basically from NDT sensor, we get the voltage, right? And that you can use using the Bayesian method. And then there are, as I said, there are several other ways we can do that, like we can have sonar. For that we use different kind of neural networks for data fusion, and then laser. So depending on your sensor, what output you are actually getting, depending on that we actually kind of select what data analysis method we do use, right? Whether you get image, whether you get some kind of values like voltage or some frequency, whether you get some kind of pulse echo or pulse signal or videos or text. I think I have not kind of included all of those here. But depending on the output you get, that also somewhere relevant with your sensor, then you decide what kind of data analysis method you do use it, right? And then if you will try to look into this multimodal data fusion, especially when we talk about structural health monitoring. So if you will see that the look into that kind of the importance, so I have kind of tried to highlight is that the fusion means that that tuning the information from different sources and different times into a single representation that's going to support the decision better than any resources alone, and that's what we just saw, right? That means the better than the synergy we are after, right? So now we will try to kind of look into this SHM, that we need always the multiple sensors, right? But so by combining them we can build a very complicated or very complete and accurate picture. So what we generally do is that you can see I have tried to kind of show you using this figure. So we start with the data sources here, right? That means heterogeneous sensors, they will give us images, they can give us pulses, they can give us voltages, they can give us time series. Depending on our sensor, we kind of get the data sources, right? So once you have the data sources, then we move to the next one, and that process is called as a data fusion system, right? So basically, once you have the data sources, before we go that, we have another also, which is data extraction. So once you have the data sensor sources, you go to the data extraction or filtering those data. That means this is where we clean, we resample, we time align, we quality check, right? So from this process to this process, we do have an internal process, and that is like cleaning the data, resampling the data, or time aligning, the quality checking. Those are the things, the internal process we do that before we go to the data fusion system, okay? So once you collect your data, you kind of clean your data, then we go to the data fusion system, and that is going to feature like state estimates or that kind of learn the embedding that can capture what matters, right? So once this data fusion system we are done with that, then finally we kind of hand this to the data analytics technique. That means we kind of we do the diagnostics, we kind of detect if there is any kind of anomaly or forecasting uncontrolled. So basically the main understanding of this is quite simple, that fusion is a pipeline, right? So that basically do clean, they kind of align, they kind of combine, represent, analyze, and finally pay off the decision with lower uncertainty than any single sensor could provide. That's how this kind of multi-model data fusion technique, or some way you can say that combining the heterogeneous sensor is giving us better compared to the single sensor, right? And then as we said that if one sensor is a single eyewitness, then data fusion is the panel of the experts, right? Because we kind of combine different modalities to the structure to get a very cleaner, faster and more reliable story. As we said, there are several significance of applying data fusion. So there first is efficiency, like it removes the redundancy and those things, and then there is a resilience also. That means if one source, as we said, goes quiet during the downtime, other one can compensate. Then the clarity, so by reinforcing this shared information and this kind of rejecting contradiction, we can boost the SNR. That means pushing the signal above the noise, right? And then as we said, that capability, definitely we get a lot of enhanced better picture of the asset, like material state or loading or environments, all in one place, right? So basically you will see that by looking into all of these points where the significance lies, basically the value of the multimodal fusion, when we talk about the SHM, is quite simple. That means do less but learn more. So less redundant, you will have redundant data or less uncertainty or less time, while you gain a lot of reliability, while you gain a lot of accuracy and lot of coverage. When our sensors, they collaborate instead of compete with each other, we kind of get the decision more faster, we get the decision more smarter, more safer as well, right? So basically you can see that instead of using like 7-8 sensors all differently, you can kind of combine it together, make a system or the hardware, and then which is going to give you a lot of significance, a lot of better performances compared to single-handedly using one of those sensors. And then when we say the data fusion, they can mean that several different things, right? They can generally mean the 5 common ways the data fusion can classify. And then I have tried to kind of write down those 5 things. The first one is the weightage classification, that what role each of these sources plays. So basically you can see the sensors are different part of the truth. That means like camera plus strain gauge. So together they can complete the whole picture. So multiple sensors, they can observe the same thing, or we average or vote to increase the confidence. And if you will look into these sources, you can see that they can interact with the new information, images that none provide alone. Sometimes you can think about vibration plus temperature, right? If you kind of combine it together, what we get? We can also understand the damping. If you look into the vibration separately, if you look into the temperature separately, maybe we will not be able to calculate the damping. But when you kind of combine it together, you can understand the state of the damping state, right? Similar way what it does is that sometimes by using one of the single sensor, you can get one of the output. But when you try to combine this together, you kind of get about some information which one of those single sensors cannot actually give you, okay? And then there is another one, which is that the classification one, right? These classification, and that actually means that what goes in, that comes out. Okay, that means this is more like a more plumbing method or more plumbing diagram. So where it names the fusion by the abstraction level. You can see that this is one of the very important one. So they are having like a lot of input-output level calculation. One is being called as the first one, you will see that the data in, data out. That means you can think about one of the example of raw time series alignment or denoising across the sensor. Then, so there are separate ways of do that. One is like D is to D, that means data into data. Another one is D is to F, you can see this one. The second one, that means data in and features out, right? That means you are extracting the features like RMS, spectra, strain model. And another one is that feature in. So basically you can see that you are giving some input, you are getting some output. And depending on that, like sometimes you put some data in, you get some feature. Sometimes you are putting some feature, you are getting some feature. Sometimes you are putting some data, you are getting data. So that's how generally it works. And as I said that, it's having generally 6 ways to do that. D is to D, that means data to data. D is to F, which means you put the data but you get the feature out. Then one is that the F to F, that means you put the feature in, you still get the feature out. And then there is you get the feature in and you get the decision out, and that's been called as an F to D. And then you put the decision in and you get the decision out. Maybe end-to-end models one is a very good example of that. And the another important one is that you get the data in that as an input and you get the decision out. That means similar way that you kind of think about data into end models, right? So this ladder actually lets you place any fusion method by simply just asking that what the label of my input and my output is. And that's how it generally works out, right? And similar way there is another method which is the JDL model, and the main kind of funder of this JDL model is that which stage of interface we are in. So the first one, if you look into that, the first one was that what role each sources play, right? Whereas the second one is that what goes in what comes out. That means you have to understand what data you put in, what features you put in, and what you are getting in. That's the simple strategy of the second one. What is the third one strategy is that what stages of interfaces we are in, right? That means that a process of oriented views with levels. Again, we have different kind of process. First one is the L0, which has been called as a source processing, that means calibration, time synchronization, and then comes the next one, which is the object refinement, right? That means you track the object, you estimate what is happening, estimate the steps, and then the next one is that situation assessment. Similar way that been followed with the impact assessment as well as being the process programming. Right? That means this kind of methods or this kind of particular classification will tell you that the where fusion lives in the pipeline. That means like taking sensor, updating models, where actually use your fusion model lives, things. And another important classification is that the architecture classification. So architecture classification is that where the computation happens. So you can understand each of these classification have their own tagline, which is going to literally tell you that what is exactly happening and what is the basic kind of strategy for this classification, right? So for the architecture, from the word only you can understand that basically the main strategy of this is that where it is happening, where the computation happens. So it can happen in several spaces. Like first is the centralized, that means everything streams to a hub, right? Second one is the decentralized, that means local node decides and then they share. And the third one is the distributed, that means a mix of edge plus cloud that's gonna be cooperating together. Okay. So you choose one of these, and then depending on the bandwidth, depending on the latency, depending on the power, basically this is going to tell you that where your computation is happening, at which stage, whether it's happening on the cloud, whether it's happening on the node, whether it's like combining the edge and the cloud separately, or whether it's actually been happening very locally. So where is actually this computation is happening? That's what it's going to tell you. And another important one is that abstraction classification. So that is the another one. That means that low, medium, high. So that means whether you have low level, whether you have a medium level, whether you have a multiple level. Low level means that data level fusion we are mentioning here. Whereas the medium level is basically the fusion level, and the high level is the final level, which is the decision level, right? And what is multiple level? The last one, that is means combining any one of two. That means you can combine the data level plus decision level, or you can combine the feature level plus decision level, right? So you can see there are 5 total, basic classifications of this, and all of this having kind of understanding about, especially importantly, to choose the right fusion of your SHM. That means which of the classification you are going to use, or at what stage you are going to use, and that's what this kind of details going to tell you, right? Is it clear to everybody? Then let's try to quickly look into that. So you align raw signals from multiple accelerometer and average them before any feature extraction. So which of this level is this? Here just now we have talked about the different kind of level, right? Data in, data out. Another one is data in, feature out. Then feature in, feature out. Decision in, decision out. Data in, decision out, right? Now let's go back to the question that you align your raw signals from the multiple accelerometer and average them before any feature extraction. Which of this level is this? Which one? So what you are doing, you have some kind of raw data, and then you are trying to produce again the data. That means it's going to be data in, data out, because you are combining the raw data to produce a redefined raw data. You are not kind of featuring any kind, you are not putting any feature, you are not doing any other decision, right? That means it's just data in, data out. Is it clear to everybody? Similar way, if you go back to this one, so try to think about the other examples that how this kind. So this is one of the very important type of classification of this data fusion technique or data fusion classification. So please try to think about what could be the other examples when you kind of putting up some kind of feature, you get some decision, or sometimes you kind of putting some decision in and you're getting some decision out, right? And then now if you try to think about several people, they are measuring the same thing, like taking the room temperature with different thermometer. So data fusion level is the step where we combine those kind of raw readings before we do any fancy calculation. So basically what we try to do is that we simply pull together all the original data from the different sensors. If you remember, this one. So when we are talking about this, I think this is one of the very ideal example for everybody to imagine. So let's try to kind of talk about more the digital signal processors. I think that's gonna help you to kind of imagine things more in a better way. Yeah. So as we said that when you try to think about putting up all this data together, original data coming from different kind of sensors which you have considered. Sometimes what happens is that we line them up in time. Sometimes we merge them into one stream, right? And the goal is basically to make the raw information, as we said, that more cleaner, more complete, or more stable, right? And there is two common ways we do that. One is the average fusion, and another one is the concentration fusion. And then there are also other ways we will see into the next slide. So the important one, or the main important one was the average fusion. That means many thermometers but one answer. That's one of the example, right? That means if you have several sensors watching the same behavior and each has its bit of random error. So we average their readings together, the random errors, then try to cancel out. So the result is less noisy and you get more accurate. You can simply understand that. I mean, if you have like 7-8 thermometers, you are trying to kind of measure the temperature, and maybe one or two will have like not work properly, but you kind of taking the average of all of this. So basically you will come out with a very perfect or some way accurate temperature measurement, right? So this is one of the example of the averaging fusion, okay? And another one is the concentration fusion. So basically stitching clips into a movie, if you can think an example. That means we join the raw sequences end to end here to make a longer, more richer stream, okay? And this is very useful when sensor gives very different part of the story. For example, different cameras covering different angles. So what you do is that you kind of merge all of this together, try to make a story and try to understand how the whole story is building in, right? And that has been called as a concentration fusion. So another important one is, as we said, that when we talk about the data fusion level, we try to combine one instead of one, like a separate sensors, right? So another one is, as we said, that weighted averaging. As we said, that imagining asking 5 pens at a time, you know that two of them have very accurate watches, but you don't treat all answers very equally. So you trust the good watches more, right? So weighted averaging, as we said, that it does exactly same. It gives more influence to the reliable sensors and less to the flaky ones than the average. So if you will look into the first one, in the first one what we do, we have like 10 sensors. We average them together to get a better performance. And 10 of the sensors are measuring the same thing. Okay? Whereas this one, the concentration fusion is that to have different stories of the different angles, to kind of make it as a whole, to understand the whole story, and then to understand what is exactly happening, right? Whereas weighted averages, we already know that, okay, fine, we have these good sensors, we can rely on that, we cannot rely on the other. So it is not actually averaging all of this together, but knowing which of those sensors are giving us a better result, or which is like a very powerful one, or maybe switchable one to get some subtle performance, right? Similar way we have the Bayesian fusion as well. This is also like updating your belief as an evidence arrives, right? To start with what you already know. That means, for example, the breeze rarely hit above the 35 degrees centigrade in the winter, right? Then you adjust the belief, a new measure comes in. If the data look like a little bit trustworthy, that means your estimates kind of moves like more smoothly. If they are doubtful, then it moves less, right? And it is like a very disciplined way to say that given what we knew and we just saw, then what we might likely now. That means you know something from the beginning about, or you have some knowledge about the the data, and then you get some kind of output there, and then you kind of redefine your knowledge. That means that we knew something before, we get now new knowledge. Now we knew like, or now whatever we know as like as new thing, and that's how generally it works out. Okay. And then another important one is that the Damper-Schafer's theory, right? And sometimes sensors don't kind of give you very neat probabilities. They give you a decrease of belief with some kind of uncertainties. So what is this DS does is that DS like pooling the several cautions, like doctors say that, okay, I'm 70% confident it's X, but I am not sure. And that's what is, that means that this method combines those beliefs, highlighting agreements, and keep tracking of the leftover uncertainty. So basically it will say, I feel that there can be 70 to 80% of chance you have some crack in here, but it can possibly also happen that 20% it can be a false alarm, right? And that's where it generally does. And then another very famous one we all have heard about, that's like the Kalman filter, right? So what Kalman filter does is that's actually think of any sat nav tracking to car. So it mixes the prediction where the car should be next, given the speed, given the direction, with a very kind of noisy GPS reading. But if the GPS is very jumpy, then it trusts the prediction more, right? If the GPS is very clear, then it leans to the measurement, and that is kind of a Kalman filtering. So basically that kind of blending the prediction as well as the measurement at every step to get a very smooth or very accurate estimate. It is blending that what measurement you are going to have with the prediction, whatever prediction, and then they are kind of blending it together to kind of get a very smooth and accurate performance, right? And then another one is that the particle filtering. So that is also, now you can think about some tracking a drone in fog, right, where the movement is very quirky. Instead of just one prediction, we keep many little guesses, right, like many little particles. So speed around where the drone might be, so or many other factors like the parameters. There are many other parameters which can actually affect. So basically you can see that with each of this new reading, the unlikely guesses they fade and the good ones survive. That means also some way similar that you are getting some new readings. So you may have like 10, 20 guesses. Okay, fine, the drone can go like this way or this other way. But then you will keep tracking the velocity of the drone. You keep tracking the kind of the speed of the drone and the location and the temperature, many other factors, and then you keep getting the information or the location of the drone, and then you are kind of trying to understand, okay fine, maybe the other imagination we have taken, the drone will not go this way, these are the paths the drone will follow. So basically you are getting the information and you are removing the false or some way the not the correct imagination. That's how generally it works. And we can say that this particular filtering, particle filtering is very good with nonlinear behavior. They are very good in messy behavior. That a simple Kalman filter, they cannot do that. And then there is also another method which has been called as a principal component analysis. We have all heard about PCA. So if you think about PCA, they are basically an energy preserving compressor. So you rotate the data into a very orthogonal direction, and PCAs, what they do is that they kind of capture the largest variance that can keep only the first few. Okay. So SHM is actually very important because it removes the redundant channels like many of the accelerometers or largest variance, and then keep only the few. And they leaves us with the very dominant model parameters. That means that's why the PCA is very linear. They are variance driven, and also it can kind of treat the large variance, which is very important. And then there is another one which is the independent component analysis, which is also been called as an ICA. So where PCA is like decoloritis, ICA is like they kind of separates. So it assumes sources like mix linearly, or they kind of sticks the statistical independent components. And if you will look into this kind of ICA methods, you can see that they kind of can capture the structural responses. There needs to be non-Gaussian sources absolutely, and good mixing of the data, otherwise it can fail. So ICA needs to have some Gaussian sources, it needs to have some good mixing, otherwise it's not going to work out. And then we all know about the neural networks, there's very like early fusion we say. So here what we do is that we try to concentrate on the synchronized raw streams like strain, thermography, acceleration, those things, and later CNN, RNN or transformer learn, any kind of those neural networks to join the representation, right? The strength is definitely they can handle the nonlinear couplings because they have a lot of lot of layers in that. They can also can handle the complex timing as well, but they do have also their requirement. They need a lot of labels of unsupervised or of the self-supervised data. That means they need a lot of labeled data. They are very good with the self-supervised data, but if you put a lot of like unlabeled data or unsupervised data, then most of the cases you have to be careful because it may not work. And then you have to also be careful about the regularization, you have to think about the registration of the data, otherwise the model can learn from the different sensor or the different misalignment of the sensor. And then another one, as you said, that the uncertainty or the fuzzy logic fusion, when you have a lot of uncertainty, but your uncertainty is vague rather than probabilistic, right? That means the temperature is high, vibration is moderate, then that's the period, the fuzzy logic or the fuzzy rules, they kind of combine the signals using their membership functions or their interfaces. And they are very useful with the expert knowledge. They are very useful when you have some kind of non-probabilistic data. You do not know that your data is following some kind of distribution. or you do not know the distribution of the data. So that's the period when we kind of use this fuzzy logic quite a lot. Okay. And then comes the now we kind of move from the data level to the feature level. Okay. By using the Dastur's taxonomy. So you can see that here the idea is very simple. Each sensor does its own feature extraction, right? That means we combine those features into a single representation of the classifier or they kind of use some kind of probabilistic model. And there are very common patterns for this kind of models. So the first one is that which is being called as a feature concentration. So we basically what we do is that we line up the feature from modality, right? Says like RMS, acceleration, or model damping, FBJ strain gauges, or thermal gradients, and into one long vector. So basically we line up the feature into each modality into one long vector, and it's straightforward and preserve the information. And this is a scale of definitely mismatch. They can also like cast of dimensionality. They always standardize the feature, but also consider the downstream regularization. And they also can give you a very compact model. And another important pattern is that the feature selection. So here basically we do is that we decide the feature very very carefully, like signals for our task. It can be anything, it can be damage, it can be classification, it can be remaining life of the structure, and then we use the filter methods. Like there are a lot of filter methods, we do use it, and after that we kind of try to wrap up the whole thing, or embedded methods we can use that. So basically selecting the cuts of the redundancy, they actually help us to reduce the noise, they kind of speed the training, they kind of also cut the redundancy as well. But it's very very crucial in some times when you have some lot of concentrated data or concentrated many features. So basically feature selection is that you just decide your features actually and depending on your demand, whereas feature concentration is that you line up each feature's modality into a one long vector, right? Another one is definitely PCA, that means principal component analysis at the feature stage. So we take the feature matrix, we rotate it into an orthogonal principal component, then we keep the first few and explain most of the variants. And that's how it generally works out. I mean, it can collapse, if you think about SHM, this can actually collapse dozens of correlated vibration or strain features into a handful of latent ones. I mean the important one, right? And the another one is the wavelet transform as well. This is also when the information is time frequency localized. That means it can be impact, it can be crack density. So that's the place where we kind of use this wavelet transform feature. Basically it can be a feature, the frequency trends, or it can be a high frequency details as well. And then there is another method which is being called as an CC analysis, which is also being called as an canonical correlation analysis. And what CCA does is that CCA finds the paired direction, one in each feature space, right? That is the maximally correlated. So that's what CCA does. You use it when you believe that modalities describe the same level, or if you have some kind of modalities, we kind of describe the same latent phenomena but with different units. For example, if you think about the vibration feature or the strain feature of the same mode, and that's where we kind of use the CCA, right? And another one is the independent component analysis, that's been called as an ICA. So here we look into the statistically independent latent. So here we are looking into the correlated one, and the independent one is that we are looking into the statistical independent latent factors in the pool features. So it is very useful to separate the operational or environmental effects from the structural health indicators after the feature extractions. If you can think about some kind of non-Gaussian sources, mixing should be very roughly linear. And then there is another method which is also being called as a sparse coding. That is also kind of basically means that another term is that the dictionary learning for this. So when we learn the dictionaries for each of these modalities and represent features with few of the active coefficients, and that's the period we call it as a sparse coding. And then there are few others also which is being called as a speech vector encoding, or the multiple kernel learning. So multiple kernel learning is also another important one. So rather than forcing all features into one, what MKL, has been also been called as an MKL. MKL does is that it kind of learns a weighted combination of the kernels, or one per modality, or like feature family, and that's how it generally works. So basically as a learner, as an engineer, we kind of discovered that how much each of the kernels should matter. And after that, and they're very good at, very excellent when the modalities are very different similarity of motion. That's the period we kind of use it, like, kernels must be very well tuned. They has to be normalized. So that's the way we kind of use this kind of multiple kernel learning. We have to we take the weighted combination of the kernel. We need to understand which of the kernel is actually having very strong effect, and according to that we do that. But you have to understand that the kernel which you are going to use, they need to be normalized and they need to be well tuned before we kind of combine it together. And then when we talked about the mixing or the raw data, then there is another one as well, which has been also called as a decision level fusion. So because no single judge is perfect, right? So by letting several judges always vote, we will see that we can trust and we can get a better judge, right? And we get like more safer, more reliable verdict. Similar way that decision level fusion also does is like a very simple election. It's basically each of the sources will say yes or no, and the option with most votes will win. So works very well when the sources are very similarly trustworthy and sometimes make random mistakes. That's the place we kind of use this kind of decision trees. Similar way that there have like certain ways we can do that, like there are majority voting, there are weighted voting, there are plurality voting, expert opinion aggregate, fusion by imagine. So there are several ways we could actually possibly do that. And so basically you will see that this decision level is just like smart voting among the model or the sensors, right? And then there are several other ways also. So this one was like quite simpler, you can understand, whereas then you will may have like a little bit of complications. One is that the Bayesian model averaging. Like you could think about like checking several weather apps at the same time. You don't trust them equally every day. So you can learn from ones and that have been like right lately, and then you fit it to the today's condition, and that's where the Bayesian averaging works. So Bayesian averaging or Bayesian model averaging does that mathematically. So it blends decision while giving more weight to the model that look more reliable for the case. So basically you have like 7-8 apps, you see all of those 7-8 apps, maybe those 3 apps are giving you better results from the last 7-8 days. You trust on those 3 apps, you average that, and that's how generally it works, okay? And then stacking, this has also been called as a meta learner. So this is actually like having a coach who watches how each of the player performs and then decides the final play. So we train a meta model that learns when to trust which model, and that gives the situation to produce the final decision, and that's how generally the stacking works. And similar way there is another one which is the logical rule fusion. So sometimes simple rules they beat the fancy match, right? So you can write if or then rules combining the sources. So if temperature is normal and vibration spikes, so then flag early damage. So if something will happen, then something will happen. So that's how generally this logical rules work. So if there is any condition, then something will happen, or if there is some increasing of or changing of stiffness, then there will be some changes of damage. So that's how generally the logical rule fusion works out. And then there is like consensus based fusion. So basically if you think about you picture a jury, people discuss, right, people compare reason and iterate until they are kind of agree. So you will see that this kind of CBF is that basically they keep refining the group decision, nudging the sources towards a consistent answer. So basically you can think about they will keep discussing about the things, and according to the discussion they will then finally going to go to a final discussion or the final thing. And then another one is that the evidence based or evidence combination. So not every source is very confident, right? Some say probably yes, some say but not sure, something like that. So this method adds up to the degree of the belief across the sources, right? And also shows you how much uncertainty remains. Handy when information is very precious, handy when you kind of maybe not not quite confident. And then there is another one which is also game theory based fusion. So you can imagine the departments with different priorities, right? Safety, cost, uptime, they do have their different goals, each pushing a choice. So like game theory models those interactions, and then they kind of use those trade-offs to pick a decision that's the best overall with interesting mild conflict. That means like every department may do have some kind of interest, may do have some goal. This fusion will like pick the best one, which will be maybe work out for everybody, and will have some kind of conflict of interest as well, right? And that's how the game theory works. And then we introduce another kind of method which is the hybrid fusion. That means mixing 2 or more of this. So whatever we have seen before, and so hybrid fusion is that mixing of one of this, right? Because we know that SHM rely on SHM especially rarely has a very single base level across the all sensors, and across the all regions. So some of the signals they kind of use very early, and some kind of improve the SNR, right? So others may be most informative as features, and final decisions can benefit their assembly. So that's the reason we kind of trying to combine in two of those fusion methods and try to do that. So you can look into that in this tabular format. We have talked about the different kind of or the different types of diacetyl classification which have been summarized here. The one of the important one, also the first one, which is the DTFTDC, and that's been called as a serial pipeline actually, and they start with the data level. Okay, you can see it here, and they clean. So once they start with the data level, cleaning, alignment, or averaging for the correlated gauges, then they extract the feature. This one, yeah, this one. Okay, the second one. So here we are talking about that once they kind of give the data, then they kind of extract the feature here, and after that what they do? So you can see that there are different ones I have tried to explore. The second one is the DT to FT to DC. That means you are giving the data, you are getting as an FT, and then finally you are getting as a decision. Okay. So you start with the data level, cleaning, alignment, or averaging for the correlated data. You extract the feature. Maybe you can think about some kind of wavelet or something like that, and then you use the decision level, and then assemble to combine the output. Similar way, there are like parallel multiple level also, like you run the data level and then you get the decision level. So there are separate ways you can do that, and basically you can see that if you look back here. This one was talking about only one, you are getting data, or you are giving data, getting data, you are giving features, getting data. So it's like only one way. But where if you will look into this is basically the combination of the ones, right? Depending on what we need, and then the input you get, the output you get, and then with this input and output, what exactly the combination you are getting. And there are several examples also for this kind of cases. Okay. So as we said that one is the data, the first one. So I have tried to highlight few of those. So one is the data in, data out one, right? We input the raw signals and the output improved. So that's another one. And then there is a data in, feature out. So there are several of this. I will not get into the details of this one, but I think it's a very good idea for you to understand how does it work, what parameters we generally consider, especially when we talk about feature to decision or decision to decision, or sometimes feature to feature. So how actually they do work. If you will kind of look into those details, you can see that when we talk about feature to feature, they kind of craft a very clean, low dimensional representation, whereas when we go to decision, they will resolve some kind of conflict and raise the trust. That means you have like 7-8 decisions, right? Maybe a jury, they have taken like 3-4 decisions like separately in that way. So you kind of putting all these decisions together and then finally finding out the final decision which will work best for you. And that's how generally it works. And as I said that there are like abstraction based classification also, we just saw that. That means the idea is that we don't just classify the raw signal themselves, we classify the higher level representation from them. A similar way, there is a very good example here which you can see that where the data from the multiple sensors or the multiple resources, they are fused to assess the health of the structure, and they kind of, these methods or the abstraction based classification, they kind of use to extract the abstract features from the future sense data, such as like vibration patterns and those kind of things. And so here you can see we are talking about a lot about the hybrid fusion rather than talking about one of those. So everything we are again talking about here, especially the DC classification or abstract based classification. Here we are trying to mix two types of things, whatever we have seen before of that, right? Similar way that as we said that for the abstract based classification, there can be several kind of fusion. One is the raw data level fusion. So in the raw data level fusion, there are also several methods we do that. Kalman filter method is one of those. Then we just saw the weighted average, we just saw the election decision method, mathematical statistics method. So there are several methods, and some of those whatever we have discussed in the previous slides, you will see that they have a lot of similarities into that, just like the weighted average method. You can see that there are multiple sensors, they observe the same quantity and then they weight by the same reliability, often the inverse variance. So there are several kind of ways to do that. I'm not getting into the much details into that, but I'm just talking about the terms so that it's very important for you to go back and have a look into that. Again, similar way, there is a feature level fusion, which is also some way the same, the ones which we discussed. They do have a lot, they do use it for cleaner, more information cases. They do also have their families, like the way discussed, like fuzzy interface we just saw, like, you know, when the boundaries are not crisp, when your data is very non-probabilistic, we do use it. Then we have Kalman filter method also. Then we do have neural networks as well. And then lastly, the decision level. I think that this is also like the some way we just saw it, that, you know, we have the highest level of data fusion techniques, kind of use it to understand that the feature generated into that. So now if you will try to look into the application, this is a very good tabular format where I have tried to highlight the all the details which we just say. If I will try to kind of zoom in for you. Let's go to this one. Yeah, if you will try to kind of look into that, you'll see that all three fusion levels, they kind of show up here. You can see that we have talked about that the feature level, we can talk about the decision level, we can also talk about the raw data level. So all of those types of feature level decision are being highlighted here. That means that what methods we are going to use here, right? And similar way we have talked about the description, that what could be the description that, you know, they can possibly use it. And I have also tried to highlight the papers we could possibly follow if you want to see how the different kind of real monitoring, where the raw data from the different sensors can be combined. So this is all talking about the hybrid one, where like two types of raw data has been combined for different sensors. Okay. So this tabular format will give you more of the information that what research has been done for different cases. So you can think about, you know, classic signal processing here. You will see I have also talked about raw data fusion. Yeah, so raw data fusion here as well. This paper, if you will look into the first one, right, they will talk about how the ultrasonic signal in concrete, by using the non-disseminate wavelengths, they can be used. So there are like several works has been done into that by combining different sensors. So I have given most of the important reference in the past few years. If you are interested, definitely go and have a look into that. And then comes the few traditional statistic based data fusion techniques. We kind of will look into the quickly some of these few important ones. If you think about, you know, trying to figure out what an object looks like, you know, using two of the photos from the different angles. So that's the kind of homogeneous data fusion technique we talk about here, like same kind of data from different views, and then we kind of select from there, right, to get the big picture. Basically, in probability based fusion, what we do is that we don't pretend that the data are perfect. Okay, we do model uncertainty, how likely the different explanation can be here, and we combine the evidence to get the most reasonable answer. Okay, that's what we kind of do here. And then, as we said, that there are kind of classic toolkits for that. One is the BAES, which has been, you can see here, and that's been called as a Bayesian. They kind of update your belief with new evidence. We know that how Bayesian does, right? And then there is another important one, which is the maximum likelihood. That is means that what explains, pick what best explains what you just saw, and that's what the maximum likelihood does. I mean, you can imagine testing many of the candidates like shapes and choosing the one who would kind of fix for some two photos, like, you know, somewhere like that. So it will be like 5, 6, 7, 8 photos, and but you kind of understand that when you are categorizing the dog or the cat, which one of that is going to be selected for that, and that's the basically example of the maximum likelihood. Whereas Bayesian is that you have the imagination, or you have some kind of maybe hazy images of dogs and cats. You're still getting more information, and you're still feeding that information and getting a very clear pictures of the dogs and cat, and that's what the Bayesian and the maximum likelihood does. And what is maximum entropy? It's also been called as ME. That means that be honest about what you don't know. And that's what actually the main strategy of the maximum entropy. That means when the information is clear, you choose the most uniformity distributed one that still matches the fact what you know, rather than just taking something which you do not must have, have much information about. And then the another important one is that the homogenization one. So homogenization fusion is also a very good example. Like we have two views of the same thing, right? And then we call them as an Y, you call them as an Z, two photos like together. So the main goal of this kind of homogenized fusion example is that to produce one improved example of the true state of X, right? So you can see that there are Bayesian one, there are maximum likelihood one, there are maximum entropy one, then there could be like a homogenized fusion example. So basically the main three ones are Bayesian, maximum and maximum likelihood and maximum entropy. Bayesian one is that you have the information, you get more information and then you keep changing your decision and making it more perfect. Maximum likelihood is that you kind of choosing the best one, which is defining some way relevant. Whereas the maximum entropy is that you clearly define what you don't know and you rely on where you think that there is some informative, informativity in your decision, right? And then as we say that, when we talk about while the maximizing the, so this is a very kind of two good equations to look into that when we talk about the fusion of the homogenized data. So before that, I think let's have a also quick look into this one, this particular equation here. So these are like, we are not getting into more into the details, but if you kind of, so we will also kind of give one of the home assignment to kind of model in the MATLAB. So I think it's a very good idea to go back and look into the equation and try to understand what each equation is actually talking about, right? So when we talk about this homogenized data fusion, we take multiple loops of the same kind, right? That means we can use Bayesian, we can use ML. ML means here we are talking about the maximum likelihood, okay? Or we can use the maximum entropy here. So we can use different kind of approach and different kind of thinking to blend the evidence. And then finally to end up with a very clearest, with a very most honest picture of reality that what we can. And along with that we are sure about, right? So basically depending on what information we have, how we want to process, what data we have, whether we want to trust the data or we just want to be clear about what we know. According to all of this process, then we and that's been called as an basically homogenization of the data, right? So once you kind of know about the whole process, that is being actually defined with this equation here, okay? It is actually the Bayes rule. So this equation is been also called as an Bayes rule. I don't know if I have written this here. So that is BAYES. It's been called as a Bayes rule. That rule is basically saying for updating our belief about the rule we are following and about the true state of X after seeing two measurement of Y and Z. So basically this Bayes rule is saying that we are trying to talk about the real state or the true state of X by observing two measurement, which is Y and Z. And that's been called as a Bayes rule. Okay? Thank you. And this has been called as an not working.
Okay. No, I think it is written there in a slide.
Is it written there? Okay.
Bayes.
Yeah. So
maximum
it's
entropy and then Bayes.
yeah. So it's basically BAYES. Okay. So you want to measure your X, right, from the information of Y and Z, and that's how it generally works out. So that's what you can see it here. Basically, you are trying to understand the true state of X from the measurement of Y and Z, and that's what your Bayes rule actually says. So Y, Z are independent once X is known. And their evidence they kind of multiplies here. You can see this here, and this is the equation where we try to kind of talk about two of these states and how the Y and how the Z is actually kind of affecting this, and then when you try to simplify it could look like that. So you know the some measurements on values of Y, you know the some values of Z, and then from that you can actually calculate the state of X, and that's what it actually works out, right? And now if you will try to kind of look into the other parameters which are important, one is the marginal postal mode, that's been also called as an MPM here. So while the maximum or the MPM, they estimate the single most likely point of the entire joint distribution. So what this MPM does is that MPM focuses on the individual components, right? It is very, very particularly useful when we are interested about estimating each of the variables separately rather than jointing it together. And then we kind of try to talk about using this equation. So basically X equals to ARG of the max of this thing, okay? Where when you talk about the this part here, like the second part of this, right? So here you can see the estimated of each variable we are taking, and that is being obtaining by the value of xi, and that is maximizing your marginal states, okay? And this is a very marginal, if you look into this particular one, this is a very marginal distribution, and that is being derived by integrating the joint posterior here through this integration over all the other variables, okay? And in other words, you can say that summing out the uncertainty from the rest of the system, and this is expressed as this one. So these two are very, very important when you are trying about if you look into that. So first here we are trying about the measurement of X, Where here, if you will try to look into the about, we are trying to think about, and this equation is being called as an MPM. So basically, we are trying to focus into one of the component here, or one of the particular case here. So for yeah, let's go to this one. Yeah, maybe if you try to consider this one. So here, if you look into the X, this is one of the individual component rather than mixing of all. And that's what we kind of do it using the MPM. Basically, we kind of use the entire joint distribution, but we are mainly interested about understanding one single likelihood point. So basically, you will see that what MPM does is that it allows us to perform the variable wise estimation, which is often more practical for real world sensor fusion or the structural health monitoring. But the reliability of this approach, you can see they are a little bit complicated because of the integration and a lot of other integral cases, and that's the reason it can be very computationally heavy as well. And now if we will try to combine the information from the similar data sources, what we call, as we said, that we call it as a homogenized data, right? So here you can see that from the homogenized data, we are moving into the heterogeneous information or heterogeneous data. So should we take like a 5 minutes break maybe for everybody and then start? So we'll start at 11:55. Before we start, I hope you all have received yesterday's tutorial details. Okay, so I will suggest that please try to practice that. And if you have any other difficulties, then please let me know. And as I said, that try to install the libraries before you run the things. Okay, if everybody is fine, then can we just start the, yeah. So as we said that we talked about a lot of homogenized data. So now we are going to talk about the heterogeneous data fusion. And when you talk about the heterogeneous one, if you try to consider an example where two different kind of data are available. So the aim of the designer, or our aim is to kind of reconstruct one tomographic image by, if you think about, I don't know how many of you actually heard about the X-ray or tomography. You all know about it, right? That we generally try to kind of generate microscopic images by using those things. So if you can imagine that we quite use it for the composites. We don't use it much for the concrete and steel, but we do quite use it for the composites. Especially for composite, we know that it is mixing of component A and component B. One is being called as a fiber, one is being called as a matrix. So basically you get some images like that, or any kind of images where your fiber may be something like that. So you get some kind of micrography or some kind of microscopic images. So you can also do this for metal. We do quite a lot for metals as well. So you understand with this tomography, with this X-ray, the microscopic images of the structure, that what exactly is happening, whether there is some crack or some kind of deformation, some fiber crack. So many things we kind of actually do that. And that's where we kind of do a lot of tomography, we kind of use a lot of X-ray data, right? So now if you will try to think about the tomographic image by integrating the X-ray data and ultrasonic, and then there are several ways to do that. There are like X-ray, there are as an ultrasonic, so several ways we could do that, right? So if you think about the X-ray measurements, they can provide the information about the mass density of the matter. Again, when we talk about this tomography or when we talk about this method, every method will give you different output, okay. So when we talk about this X-ray measurement here, you can see that they actually provide information about the mass density of the matter, and which you can denote as possibly X, okay. Yeah, let me just so here we are trying to just understand this equation, okay. So where we are trying to define this as X by the ultrasonic testing probe that can give us some kind of acoustic reflectability of the measure, that we can denote as R, okay. So these are the fundamentally very different properties which is being measured by the different technique. This is not the similar thing, these are very two different details we are kind of measuring by using the very different methods, okay. So now if we will try to assume the data sets, we actually work with X dash and Y R dash. So if you try to think about the X dash as well as the R dash, they are shifted version of the original variable, right? And now if you will try to write down this one, this is actually basically your X dash equal to phi X function of X, whereas in R dash equal to this one, right? So both of this equal to, you can see that they are very much linear functions for simplicity. So we have taken a very linear function. It can be complicated also. So we have taken a very linear function. And what this actually reflects you here, this reflects the fact that the raw data we collect is often transformed or processed version of the underlying physical quantity. So basically when we try to use this, when you have two different type of measurement by using two different techniques. Right? That is the time when we call as a fusion of mixing the heterogeneous data. Okay. And they are kind of, if you try to combine these two X dash and Y dash data sets, you can try to combine this data mathematically. You can see that we generally adopt a very independent assumption between the X-ray and the ultrasonic data. So this simplifies the joint probability expression, and they allow us to apply the, again, the Bayes theorem, okay. And that's what we have kind of done it here. So basically we kind of trying to use the joint probability expression by using the Bayes theorem. You can see that. So here the posterior probability of the X as well as the R, they give the observed data of X dash and R dash. That means by using this one, if you see this one, this is going to be your X dash, this is going to be your data for the X dash. Similar way, if you will do this one, then for the R dash also, that means arrange the maximum of this one, then you will be getting the marginal posterior modes for the R dash. So basically you calculate the marginal posterior modes for the X dash as well as the R dash, okay. So then once you kind of calculate this, and then if you kind of think this Bayes equation, right, this is know that how the two properties of the X and R are interfered from the observed of X dash and R dash, right. So finally if you can look into that, you can see that the denominators, which is this one, or maybe you can consider this one, this is a very evidence term, and that is being calculated by integrating over all possible X and R, and that's what we have done. So the denominator we have tried to kind of do the integration for all the possible of X and R, and that's what we kind of calculated the denominator. So once you kind of understand that, then what is the next process? That means once you calculate this one, then you simply put all of this, and then finally you get the values of X and R with the data set of X dash and R dash. So basically we are trying to calculate the X and R with the data set or the measurement of X dash and R dash. Is it clear to everybody? So you can see that by using this Bayes theorem, we can actually integrate the multiple heterogeneous data sources, and that's what we have actually done it here, even when they measure the very different physical parameters or physical quantities. This is a very powerful technique when we talk about the structural health monitoring and tomographic reconstruction, where combining the multiple modalities often yields in a much cleaner way. So now if you look into the first one, this is the heterogeneous one, right, by using the same Bayes theorem, right, where we are measuring the X by the information from Y and Z, right. Similar way, if you will look into that, here we have a heterogeneous data, and what we are doing, we are trying to measure X and R with the data sets of X dash and R dash, right. Here the X and R, they are being taken in a very different techniques. They are giving you a very different data. They are not similar to each other, and they are also giving us different output, different types of output as well, okay. But we are using the same equation. So basically we can use it for this one for different methods, and whereas we have only one, and we just want to know about X. So there is only one method we are investigating by using different parameters. Here we are investigating two of the methods by having 2, 3, 4, whatever data sets you are having. That means different data sets, and they do not have any relationship. Okay. And as we said that we continue, when we talk about this traditional statistic-based fusion technique, we start moving into more probability-based models, and then we know that the Kalman filter is definitely we cannot ignore that, right? So as with the previous cases, we have seen that there is a key challenges of the unknown probability laws, right? So here in this context, you can see that we will be talking about this unknown probabilities law, which is being talked as a P in the bracket x dash x. That means we are trying to calculate or understand the values of x dash with the information of the x. Similar, we are trying to understand the values of r dash with the information of r. And that's what we are trying to do. That means we can efficiently convert this heterogeneous data fusion problem into a homogeneous one, right? However, this is often not very straightforward. Therefore, we need a lot of assumptions and lot of relationship to kind of justify, which are sometimes usually extremely required. So when we talk about this probabilistic based methods, to try to address the challenge, a range of probability based methods have been developed, and there are a lot of ones like, I think most of you must have heard about. One is the state space models, one is the Bayesian interface, then Markov models, then possibility theories, then there is one which is evidential reasoning. So there are separate ways of the probability based method. We try to use this. And why we try to kind of use this? Because we trying to kind of convert this heterogeneous data to the homogenized data. And why we do that? What could be the benefit for this? So what we know that, so first we know here that when we talk about the heterogeneous data, right, we have only x and we are defining using y and z, right, and that's been called as a homogenized one. And now if you have like x and r by the information of x dash and r dash, so this x we don't have anything to prepare, but if you think about this one, this is like this is like not dependent with each other, okay? So now if you will try to kind of establish a relationship between this x and y, what will happen? We know that this x and this r are very different way we measured it. They are giving us very different output, very different technique, okay? But there is a mathematic formation where you can establish some kind of relationship here. So what is the benefit? Why we do that? So this is the base theorem we were talking about, right? We are not concerned about the homogenized one, it's quite easy. We are just concerned about this one. So why we try to build the relationship between x and r? Anybody? Just think in a very simple way. You are doing some kind of SHM of any infrastructure, right? To have some strain data, you have measured with some kind of sensor, right? To have some kind of vibration data, you have defined in some kind of sensor. So now if you will try to make a relationship between the strain data and the vibration data or displacement data, anything, why we can kind of do that? Now what is the benefit for us? Don't need to think about very complicated way. Think about very simple fundamental approach. Why we want to do that? Why? Anyone?
Basically, if you have one relation, then any other values also you can predict the strain values.
That you can anyway from the strain data you can get the strain values, right? You can measure that. Why we try to kind of have a relationship between these two? Think a very fundamental approach. Don't need to think something very high. So the first advantage is that what is our main role here? Our main role is to monitor the structure, right? So that means your bigger role is that some way the SHM. So that means both of these are contributing into one of the big role or the big goal, right? Our goal some way is not different, right? But we are just using different data by different techniques to get the SHM. But you have to also remember, once you have all of this data, you are going to fit into some of the machine learning models, because we are talking about the huge data, right? The moment you will be able to connect or build up some relationship here, don't you think that, once you have more homogenized one, you using some kind of machine learning model will be much more easier, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, our goal is somewhere same, right? We are not kind of monitoring the health of the bridges when we are talking about the details of the building, right? When we are talking about the details of the building, that means we are talking about the accelerometer rate or strain gauge rates or those sort of things. For a building we are talking about. We are not suddenly talking about, okay, what is happening in the bridge, what is happening somewhere else. So our goal is somewhere similar. That means once we get the data, we are transforming, because we are all here talking about the large data sets, right? So we are going to feed into some of the machine learning model, right? That means some way our calculation will become computationally less efficient, because we can use some kind of easily machine learning model somewhere also. Another important thing is that also you will see that sometimes combining two data can give you something which may not be represented by using one of the data. So there are like lot of benefits, and that's the reason we always try to, and this can be done by some kind of probabilistic approach. Most of the cases we need to know the distribution of the data, okay? So whenever you kind of consider this and try to build a relationship, it is very important that you should know that whether it's following a Gaussian distribution, it's not following any kind of normal. So your calculation becomes very easy when you know your problem data set, right? You know your distribution very clearly. That's the period it becomes very easy to establish this one. Unless you know you don't have the information of the distribution, it becomes very quietly challenged, and there is no point of establishing that, because your computation it becomes very heavy, right? So that's the reason actually, after the Bayes theorem we kind of take it further and try to use some of the probabilistic based method to do that, to kind of understand that, to kind of express this kind of mathematical relationship between these two. And as I said that there are several ways we can do that. There are like Bayesian interface or Markov models possibility theory. So there are a lot of ways we can do that. And then there is another important way we can do that, which is being called as a least square based estimation method. Such is like an optimal theory or KL filter. So there are a lot of ways we could possibly do that, and during this also we can input a lot of uncertainty. That means we can derive like most accurate result. Our data can be most accurate as well, and that can derive the estimate from the noisy or incomplete data as well. So as I said that there are several ways we can do that. There are several concepts we can do that, and one of the important concepts we always talk about, which is the Kalman filter concept. So if you try to think about one of the most powerful tools in this area, they are this Kalman filter. So this is a very mathematical framework that predicts the state of the dynamic system in the presence of the uncertainty. So basically you have a lot of uncertainty in your, that can be any kind of uncertainty, environmental uncertainty, manufacturing uncertainty, depending on what parameter you are considering. So it can actually take care of a lot of uncertainty for your calculation. And it does this by combining the information of the system's previous state with the new measurement. We know that how this actually works. You have the previous knowledge, you get the new knowledge, you feed into that, and then kind of trying to get a better prediction. Right? That's how it actually works out. And then this is generally this equation. So in this formulation we have a state vector x. You have state vector x xk, right? And then you have which evolves according to the linear stochastic differential equation. So your xk will be, this is a linear equation, we can clearly understand that. And then if you will talk about with the measurement, so in the measurement you can see that there is several ways we can calculate the a, b and w, and this xk is being called as a state vector here. So this equation this is basically the backbone of the KL filter, or this is the backbone of the Kalman filter concept. By iteratively updating the state of the state, that means you can check this A, B. So by iteratively, if you will keep changing it, you will be coming with a new measurement, and the Kalman filter, they will produce a best estimate of the system despite of the uncertainty. So basically you keep the trial and error method, and how do you do that? You have some basic information from the previous state, you get new information, you change your equation, and then you get a new result. That means a new value of xk, right? And that is the main backbone of the cave, or you can say Kalman filter. You have this basic information, you put the values of the all these values from the previous information, then you get the new information, then your all values will change, you will get a new xk. Similar way, then you keep changing the trial and error until you kind of get a very accurate prediction, right? And that's how it generally works out. And as we say, that is very essential technique when we talk about the data fusion method. Similar way, I will say that you also kind of look into the other optimal methods, because I think we have already talked about this Bayesian interfaces, this Markov models quite a lot. So I will say that I'm not going to repeat those things, but you think about it more into if you have X and R, and how you can actually establish the relationship by using this Bayesian interfaces and other methods, because you already know how does it work, okay? And this is another, as I said, that is one of the very, very good example of the Kalman filter. We do quite use this a lot. And this is we have this one-dimensional example where you can see that the best estimation between the predicted as well as the observed estimation or the observed measurement here. So you can see that the dashed blue line, they represent the predicted measurement, which is based on the model, while the dot black line, they represent the observed measurement. That's how generally a representation of the KL filter possibly could look like. So that means you need to have that one of the predicted measurement model, then the actual observed model, and then you will be having the estimate produced by the KL filter, right? So that's how it generally works out. So you have a predicted measurement, you have the actual observed measurement, and then by using the KL, you will be having the essentially the final prediction, you can say that, right? Similar way, this is the kind of flow chart. How does it work? So in start, we have a state update, right, where the system state is predicted from the previous state by using the state transition, and then we do some kind of error via covariance to kind of get the more uncertainty in the prediction. Then we kind of try to use the Kalman gain in the computer, and then finally we kind of correct the state estimation, and this is a whole trial and error process. You can see that this whole things are going up and down, and until and unless you get something which is kind of having a very good accuracy. This is a whole process which kind of works together. And this actually, if you will look into this particular two diagrams, so you can see that together they kind of actually highlight how this kind of KL actually works. They kind of filters the fuses data to minimize the error by using the prediction, measurement, and correction steps to achieve the most reliable estimate possibility in the real life. So that's how simply it actually does work out, right? Now let's try to take this. This is a very small quiz. I think you must be able to understand that. Which of the following best describes the predictive maintenance? B. Okay, so now I think as we have done two of the tutorials by using MATLAB, Python, whatever you say. So this is a home assignment for you to kind of go and look into that of whatever we have studied today by creating a code, right? So what you do is that you take some kind of acceleration data, right? Any data you can download from the internet, and you can take that and then add the Gaussian noise, and that's what you can also include that in your code. And then what you do is that you perform your data level noise, you can use by mean or median, and then you quantify your SNR gain and then plot before and after spectra. Okay. As I said that there are like 6 particular steps you need to do that. First you have to clean the accelerometer signal, right? Then you have to simulate the multiple signal with the Gaussian noise, because you are trying to add the Gaussian noise, and then you fuse the data level by sample wise, right? And then you define your SNR function, you compute the SNR, and finally you get the estimation of how that could look like. One, you have to make 2 plots. One is like before spectra and one is the after spectra. Okay. So can you try to make this MATLAB code or Python code or whatever way you can do that, right? So once you will try to make something like that, you will be coming out a graph like this, okay? And this is basically talking about the before one, and this is talking about the after one, okay? So try to kind of see. You can take a photo of this graph also. Once you kind of make the code, try to see that if you are getting something similar to this. Kind of have the different something similar. I think you have seen that we have talked about a lot of. So what you try to do is you keep system. You all have no system. So try implement both the filters and both particle filter, and try to become non-linear, and when you linear one, I think, and take the noise as your non-Gaussian noise. And how put the different Kalman and the particle. If you are interested, you can also kind of coming, that will give you a going to be any so these two papers which are interested, we can go back into this. So everything, I think 7 papers, these are mainly the review. I can have a look into that. It's gonna also fusion where you can understand the sensor data or the multi-sensor data. Okay. So yeah, I think anything else you want to ask? Anybody in the online? Anyone in the online, do you have any further questions? If not, then I think we will end the lecture here, and I think I will see you all today at the second half. Right? Okay, thank you everybody.